Hi Reddit. I'm 34F and recently moved back to the town I spent the first 18 years of my life in. It's not a big city, more like a spread out suburb that's tried to grow into something more, but still clings tightly to the same old routines and faces. I left the day after high school graduation and never really looked back, until now. Before I get into what happened, I should probably explain the dynamic with my family. I come from a very tight-knit, but not necessarily warm family. We had Sunday dinners, birthday gatherings, holiday traditions, all the surface-level signs of closeness. But underneath that, there was a quiet hierarchy that no one really talked about out loud. My Aunt Regina sat at the top of that pyramid. She wasn't the eldest sibling or the most educated, but somehow she always managed to get her way. My mom, the oldest of the three sisters, was quieter and more traditional. My other aunt, Clara, was the peacemaker who tried to keep everyone smiling, even when there was tension simmering under every sentence. Then there were the cousins. Regina's daughter, Nadia, 33F, was what you might call the family's golden thread. Everything she did was framed as a success, even when it clearly wasn't. She got married young, had 2 kids before 30, stayed in the same town, and never once strayed from the family's expectations. Whether or not she was happy didn't seem to matter. She followed the plan. I, on the other hand, didn't. I moved out of state for college. I stayed gone for years, worked my way up in marketing, eventually started a small agency with 2 former classmates, and saw it succeed slowly, steadily. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't always easy. But it was mine. I traveled, stayed single, focused on building a life that felt like it belonged to me. And I loved it. I thought, maybe foolishly, that when I finally came back, I'd be met with curiosity, interest, maybe even pride. Instead, I got silence. I moved back in late spring, into a quiet neighborhood near the lake. The house was older but charming, with wide windows, creaky wood floors, and a back deck that overlooked the water. I had it renovated while still living out of state, so by the time I arrived, it was completely move-in ready. I remember standing in the doorway that first morning with a mug of tea, watching the mist roll off the lake, and thinking, I'm home. I thought about my family that day. I hadn't told them the full details of the move, partly because I wanted to settle in first, partly because deep down, I wasn't sure they'd care. But then I figured, why not try? So I sent a message in the old family group chat. It hadn't been active in a while, but I was still in it. I kept it light. Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know I've moved back to town. Would love to catch up sometime soon. Let me know if you're around next week. I even added a picture of the lake view from my deck. Peaceful. Familiar. I thought maybe it would remind them of summers past, of fishing trips, of the way things used to feel before time and distance crept in. But the message was read and ignored. No reply. No thumbs up. Not even from Aunt Clara, who used to be the one to overuse emojis and exclamation marks in everything she typed. At first, I thought maybe the message just got lost. Or maybe no one knew how to respond. A couple of days went by, and I convinced myself they were probably planning something. Maybe a surprise welcome dinner or some kind of casual drop-by. It had been years, after all. Maybe they needed time. But a week passed. Then another. Nothing. I tried reaching out individually. Texted my mom. No answer. Called Aunt Clara. Straight to voicemail. It started to feel less like bad timing and more like a very intentional choice. Eventually, I called Aunt Regina directly. She picked up on the third ring, her voice sharp and clipped, like I'd caught her during a meeting, or worse, like she expected this call. Oh, it's you, she said, followed by an awkward pause. We figured you were too busy for us now. I blinked. Too busy. You've got your business, your travels, your life, she said, layering on that familiar passive-aggressive tone she'd mastered over the years. We didn't think you'd be interested in family dinners anymore. I just moved back, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I thought maybe we could reconnect. Another pause. Then she said, well, I suppose we didn't want to impose. The conversation fizzled after that. No mention of seeing each other. No invitation. Just a vague comment about how everyone's been so busy lately, and that maybe we'll catch you at Clara's birthday, if you're free. That was the moment I stopped making excuses for them in my head. They weren't busy. They weren't confused. They weren't waiting for the right time. They had made a choice. So I made mine. That weekend, I invited 2 of my old high school friends over, Mia and Cal. We hadn't talked in years, but when I reached out, Both of them responded almost immediately. We caught up on everything: jobs, life, mistakes, wins. We laughed, cooked, told stories on the deck until well after the sun went down. That night, I posted a photo of the three of us sitting under the string lights I'd hung earlier that week. You could see the lake in the background, calm and silvery. The caption was short, simple: "It's good to be home, even if it's not where you expect." I didn't name anyone, didn't point fingers, but I knew who would see it. And sure enough, the next morning, there was a knock on my door. I hadn't even finished my tea when I opened it. There stood Nadia, flawless as always. Long hair in a sleek braid, yoga pants, fresh manicure, sunglasses perched on her head like she was ready to film an infomercial. She didn't smile, didn't say hello. Instead, she asked, "Can we talk?" And just like that, the line I thought was blurry became painfully, unmistakably clear. I stepped aside to let her in. She walked in like she owned the place. Nadia didn't sit. She hovered, circling the living room slowly, eyes scanning everything as if she were conducting an inspection. Her fingers trailed across the edge of the bookshelf, paused on a framed photo of me with my business partners in front of our first office, then moved to the fireplace mantel, where I had placed a single photo of my parents from the early 90s, one of the few I'd kept. She didn't comment on the house, not the restored oak floors, the clean scent of lemon and cedar, or the view of the lake from the large living room windows. All she said was, "It's smaller than I pictured." I bit back the urge to laugh. "I like it," I replied calmly, walking past her and into the kitchen. "Tea? Coffee?" "No, thanks," she said, following me but not taking off her jacket. She was dressed like she was on her way to a casual meeting: leggings, zip-up, brand-name sneakers, a polished look that said she wanted to appear effortless without ever being casual. She stood in the doorway as I poured myself another cup of tea. The silence stretched just long enough to make me raise an eyebrow before she finally said, "So, what's your goal here?" I turned to look at her. "My goal? That post," she clarified, folding her arms. "The picture, the caption. You knew exactly what you were doing. Why come back after all this time and start stirring things up?" I leaned back against the counter and took a slow sip. "You mean reconnecting with two old friends who were actually happy to see me?" She narrowed her eyes. "Don't play dumb. I'm not. I'm just confused why a photo of me on my own deck with people I grew up with triggered this surprise visit." "You know how Mom is," she said, as if that explained everything. She saw it and got upset. "She said you were trying to make us look bad, like we'd abandoned you or something. Didn't you?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Nadia bristled. "You left." "I left for college. That's not the same as disappearing." I crossed my arms, mirroring her posture now. I reached out over the years. I visited. I sent holiday cards. No one responded. Not once. "That's not true," she said quickly. "We've all just been busy. You can't expect everything to go back to how it was." "I didn't," I said, setting down my mug. "I didn't expect parades or speeches or a welcome banner. I just thought maybe someone would say hi, ask how I've been, show the smallest bit of interest in the fact that I came back to the town I once called home." Nadia shook her head like I was being unreasonable. "You think that just because you started a business and traveled a bit, everyone should stop and praise you for it?" "No," I replied slowly. "But I didn't expect to be treated like a stranger either." She was quiet for a beat. Then her tone shifted, just slightly. Softer, more calculated. "Look," she said, "I know you and Mom never got along perfectly, but things change. People get used to certain dynamics. You were gone a long time. Everyone adjusted." I tilted my head. "Adjusted? You weren't here," she repeated, more firmly now. "We all build a life that didn't include you, because you made it clear that you didn't want to be part of it. So yeah, we moved on." I walked to the window, needing space between us. "That's the thing. I never said I didn't want to be part of it. I just didn't want to be controlled by it." She stayed silent, but I heard the weight in her breath shift, like she was trying not to snap. When I turned around again, her expression had darkened. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" she asked, voice low. I blinked, taken aback. "What? You think just because you lived in another state and own a small company that you're somehow above the rest of us? That you've grown, while we've been stuck here, raising kids and having boring lives?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked slowly back to the coffee table and picked up a small wooden box I'd kept from college, filled with old letters, photos, and trinkets. I held it without opening it. This isn't about who's better, I said quietly. It's about how some of us were never seen as equals in the first place. That hung in the air between us like a stone dropped in still water. Nadia didn't reply, but her silence didn't feel like understanding. It felt like retreat. Strategic. You know, she said finally, walking back toward the entryway. Mom thinks you're trying to make a scene, that you'll start turning people against the family. I raised an eyebrow. By doing what? Existing in the same town. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm just saying, if you want to be left alone, that can be arranged. But if you start playing games, don't be surprised when people stop being polite. And with that, she walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, and I stood there, stunned, not by what she said, but how calmly she said it. Like she had just delivered a quiet warning wrapped in a bow. That night, I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I opened my messages and saw a new notification. My Aunt Clara had commented on my photo, the one with Mia and Cal. Her comment? Looks like you're doing fine without us. That's good to know. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to delete it, respond, or let it sit there like a crack in a window that hadn't shattered yet. Then another message popped up, this one a private one from an old neighbor, Mrs. Alden. She was in her 70s, used to give us ginger cookies in the winter and pass out hand-sewn bookmarks to trick-or-treaters. Her message was just 5 words. They're already talking about you. I read it 3 times, then closed my phone. I didn't reply to Aunt Clara's comment. I didn't need to. The message behind it was loud enough. We see you, we don't like it, and we're letting you know without actually saying anything outright. It was a subtle nudge, one meant to sting without drawing blood. And in typical fashion, it was public enough for the others to see. But it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, things started happening. Little things, too small to be called outright attacks, but unmistakable in their pattern. I'd wave to an old neighbor at the grocery store and get a tight-lipped smile instead of the friendly hug I remembered. Mia told me she overheard 2 women at the gym, both friends of Aunt Regina, whispering about how I had come back with big city arrogance and that I was already trying to cause problems. Then Cal mentioned something that made my stomach knot. Hey, you didn't hear this from me, he said, but Nadia's been telling people you came back because your business failed and you had nowhere else to go. It was such an obvious lie, I actually laughed. My business hadn't just survived the past year, it had grown. I was still co-owner, even working remotely, and we had recently landed our biggest client yet. But I didn't bother trying to correct the story. That wasn't the point of it anyway. The point was humiliation. They weren't just trying to ignore me now, they wanted to discredit me. Twist the narrative until I looked like a lost, desperate woman crawling back to her hometown because I couldn't make it elsewhere. I should have expected it. But even then, part of me held on to a sliver of hope that they'd come around, that things could level out. That hope died the night of Aunt Clara's birthday. I hadn't planned to attend. After Nadia's visit, it felt tense. But Clara had always been the most neutral of the 3 sisters, the one who sent birthday cards with handwritten notes and always tried to keep the family connected. I decided to go, thinking maybe if I showed up quietly, it would smooth things over. I dressed conservatively, brought a homemade lemon cake, and arrived on time. The party was held at Regina's house, a sprawling 2-story with beige siding and a garden that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything was pristine, curated, and just artificial enough to feel cold. As I stepped inside, the chatter died down, just a little, before it picked back up. I caught the glance between 2 cousins I hadn't seen in years. Regina didn't come to greet me. Clara did, though, and her hug was warm. But her eyes were careful. Glad you could make it, she said, then lowered her voice. Just be patient, all right? Some people are still adjusting. Adjusting to what? I thought. That I dared to exist in the same town? Dinner was awkward. I sat at the far end of the table, next to Clara's husband and a younger cousin who spent most of the meal scrolling through his phone. Every time I tried to join a conversation, it would drift away, like I was a static interruption no one wanted to tune into. And then came the moment that changed everything. We were clearing dishes when Regina stood up and tapped her glass. Before we bring out dessert, she said, her voice sweet but commanding, I just want to say something. The room quieted. People turned toward her, smiling politely. I think it's wonderful that we're all here tonight. Family means everything, especially in times of change. My stomach sank. I knew that tone. And speaking of change, she turned her eyes toward me. I just want to remind everyone that no matter where life takes you, it's the people who stay, the ones who hold down the fort, raise the kids, keep the family close, that deserve our deepest thanks. A few heads nodded. A couple people clapped, confused. I didn't move. I stared straight at her. But of course, she added, still smiling. We welcome anyone back with open arms, as long as they remember where they came from. It was a masterclass in passive aggression, a veiled jab framed as a toast, followed by enough applause to signal the message had landed. I excused myself quietly after that. But as I drove home, something shifted inside me, a sense of calm, almost eerie in how steady it felt. Because in that moment, I realized something important. They had built this image of me, of themselves, brick by careful brick. And I had the power to tear it down without raising my voice or losing my dignity. I didn't want petty revenge. I didn't want shouting matches or confrontations in grocery store aisles. No, that wasn't how people like Regina operated. If I wanted to get through to them, really get through, I had to play the game differently. So I did. It started small. I hosted a small event at my place, a lakeside business mixer for local entrepreneurs. I didn't make a public invitation. Just reached out to a few shop owners, small business runners, the woman who ran the local art gallery, and the couple who owned the florist near Main Street. I'd met them all by accident since moving back. Casual, warm people who didn't care about family drama. They came, and they stayed late. We talked about everything: the local economy, small town development grants, how I could help some of them with branding or outreach. I offered to do a few projects pro bono to help get the ball rolling. My network from the city could be a real asset here, and they knew it. Word started to spread. 2 weeks later, the local paper did a short feature on me. Local girl returns home to help small businesses thrive. They included a photo of me on the dock with Mia and Cal, and a little pull quote. Sometimes, coming home means helping others build something better. That's when the call started. Aunt Clara texted first. Just a short, saw the article. Looks like you're doing well. Maybe lunch soon. I replied politely, said I'd let her know when I had time. Then Regina reached out, through Nadia, of course. She thinks maybe you could speak at the women's luncheon she's hosting next month, Nadia said in her message, which was strangely formal. I didn't respond. Instead, I hosted another event. This time, I rented a space downtown and partnered with a nonprofit to launch a local mentorship program for young women interested in entrepreneurship. We had 30 people show up. 4 high school seniors signed up. A local boutique offered to sponsor supplies. Again, no family invited. Again, it made the paper. But the final piece fell into place when I received an email from the city council. They wanted to recognize the mentorship initiative and asked if I'd be open to a small award ceremony at the upcoming town festival. Of course, I agreed, because I knew exactly who would be there. The town festival arrived on a bright Saturday morning, the kind where the sun hits the pavement just right and every breeze carries the smell of cotton candy and popcorn. It had been years since I'd attended one, not since I was a teenager, helping with the dunk tank fundraiser and eyeing the Ferris wheel with a mix of dread and excitement. But this time, I wasn't there to ride anything. I was there to be recognized. The city council had set up a small stage on the lawn outside the town hall. There were folding chairs arranged in neat rows, a long table of pastries and lemonade, and banners celebrating community impact and youth leadership. My name was printed on the program, just below the mayor's welcome and above a teacher who'd recently retired after 35 years. At first, I expected the usual crowd: city workers, local teachers, business owners, maybe a handful of curious townsfolk. But as I arrived and took my seat, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. There, in the second row, sat Aunt Regina. And beside her, arms crossed, face tight, was Nadia. Clara sat to their left, looking uncomfortable but trying to hide it. Several other extended family members were scattered throughout the crowd, some pretending not to notice me. Others whispered as I walked by. I kept my expression neutral, calm, because I knew they weren't there to support me. They were there to control the story, or at least to make sure it didn't get away from them. The mayor gave his speech first, short and upbeat. He mentioned the mentorship program by name and thanked the businesses who had participated. Then he gestured toward me and invited me to the stage. I stepped up slowly. I wore a simple navy dress, nothing flashy. I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. Thank you all for being here, I began. It means more than I can say. I looked out at the crowd. I let my gaze linger on my family for just a second, not long enough to make it obvious, but long enough that they knew. I moved back here a few months ago, after a long time away. I wasn't sure what to expect. I wondered if this town had changed, or if I had changed too much to belong here again. A few people nodded. Others just watched. But what I've learned since returning is that belonging isn't about staying in one place. It's about showing up, helping where you can, and lifting others as you climb. This town gave me my roots, and I want to give something back. I went on to talk about the mentorship program, the students I'd met, the businesses who stepped up. I kept my voice steady, warm, measured. And then I ended with this. I know some of you might be wondering why I'm doing all this. Why I came back now, why I'm suddenly getting involved. The answer is simple. I came back because I believed this town could still be home, not just to me, but to anyone who's ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or forgotten. I'm not here to take credit. I'm here to open doors. And those doors will stay open, with or without the approval of anyone who shut them on me years ago. The applause came slowly, then louder. Mia stood. Cal clapped hard enough to hurt his palms. A few strangers came up afterward to shake my hand, ask questions, offer support. Regina didn't clap. Neither did Nadia. They stood off to the side after the ceremony, watching as people took photos with me, congratulated me, asked about the next round of mentorship signups. Their expressions were unreadable, a mixture of cold curiosity and tight-lipped control. I knew what they were thinking. I had become visible again, but not in the way they wanted. Not as the quiet, obedient niece who stayed in the background. Not as the outsider who left and came back in shame. No, I had returned on my own terms. And they hated it. A week after the festival, I received an invitation, hand-delivered by Clara, for a family dinner at Regina's house. It was worded politely, but there was a tone beneath it that rang loud and clear. They wanted a meeting. I thanked Clara for dropping it off. I told her I'd think about it. And I did, for about 5 minutes. Then I dropped the card in the trash. There was nothing left to talk about. They hadn't apologized. They hadn't changed. What they wanted now wasn't reconciliation, it was control. They wanted to remind me where I stood. But I no longer needed a seat at their table. I built my own. In the months that followed, the mentorship program grew. Local coverage led to regional coverage. 2 of my mints won small scholarships for their project pitches. I opened a small co-working space near downtown. A space for creatives, small business owners, students who didn't want to study in their kitchens. I hosted workshops, offered resume reviews, helped with grant applications. My life became full. Meanwhile, Regina's circle started to shrink. The whispers that once targeted me turned inward. People began to notice the sharp edges behind her smiles. The controlling way she directed every family event. The way she could praise and undermine someone in the same breath. Clara stayed cordial, but distant. Nadia returned to her usual rhythm. Carefully curated photos online, vague captions about loyalty and those who really know you. But fewer people like them now. I never attended another family dinner. I never joined another group chat. And I never again asked for a seat I had to beg for. Because here's the truth. Coming home doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it means moving forward, past the people who left you out, past the walls they built to box you in, past the silence they used to remind you of your place. Now, I live in that same peaceful house by the lake. My days are full. My name is known. But not because I made noise. Because I made change. And I never looked back. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.